New Jersey. The blare of an ambulance siren cut through the night. A summer rain had just passed, leaving thin streams of water glistening on the asphalt road that led into the emergency department of Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. Medical staff gripped the stretcher tightly as they rushed under the harsh white lights. On the stretcher lay an elderly woman, around 80 years old, her head bloodied, her face pale with cold and respiratory failure. Traces of wet mud still clung to her knees. The clock read 9:17 p.m. "Severe head trauma, blood pressure dropping, breathing weak. Page the attending physician now," a nurse shouted as they burst into Trauma Room 3. Eleanor Harrington, a familiar name to the local hospital staff. This was the third time she'd been brought in after being injured while wandering off, but this time was different. This time, there was an open wound. Monica stood frozen at the doorway, clutching her mother's backpack tightly. Raindrops still dampened her shirt. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red and swollen. Her lips moved as if praying, but no sound came out. She had been the first to arrive. The one who called the police when she discovered her mother missing earlier that evening. The one who waded into the woods, shouting herself hoarse in the rain. And the one now silently asking herself, if only I had locked the door. If only I'd watched her more closely. Monica, 45, a high school teacher living alone in New Brunswick, had cared for her mother with devotion. But even devotion couldn't protect her from the exhaustion and helplessness brought on by Eleanor's worsening dementia. 2 hours later, David and his wife Linda arrived, from Pennsylvania, over 100 miles away. David headed straight for the nurse's station, his voice tight with restrained panic. "Where's my mother? How is she?" Linda, weary from the long drive, touched his shoulder gently. "Calm down, David," she whispered. As they entered the waiting room, Monica was still seated, eyes blank, not looking at her brother, not saying a word. David broke the silence first. "You let her walk out in the rain? How could you be so careless, Monica?" The words snapped something inside her. Monica shot to her feet. "You think I wanted this to happen? I haven't slept in weeks trying to keep her safe. And you? You live comfortably in Pennsylvania, and now you show up just to blame me?" David clenched his teeth. "Last year, when Mom was staying with me, she wandered off too. But you didn't let it go, did you? You drove through the night, made a scene, insisted on taking her back earlier than planned. Remember that?" "Because she was missing for 3 days, David. The whole town had to look for her. Helicopters, police, search dogs. We were all panicking. I was terrified. I didn't want that to happen again." "Well, it did happen again, didn't it?" David shouted, throwing up his hands. "I don't even know what the hell is going on anymore." "That's enough," Linda cut in, not loud, but firm. She stepped in, taking David by the arm and leading him out into the hallway. "This isn't the time to yell. Can't you see she's in shock?" David looked through the glass door at Monica, then exhaled, his eyes rimmed red. They had once been close as siblings, until a few years ago, when their mother began forgetting names, losing her way, and embarking on those wandering walks with no promised return. Eleanor had always been a fiercely independent woman. Widowed at 60, she refused to move in with either of her children. "I'm still strong," she used to say. "I can still walk, still cook. I don't want to be a burden on anyone." And she meant it. In the early years after Mr. Harrington's sudden stroke, Eleanor lived alone in her small suburban home in New Brunswick. She tended a vegetable garden, read books, and went to church from time to time. But then the first signs appeared slowly, quietly, like morning fog slipping through the cracks. At first, she started forgetting to lock the door. Then came the pots of soup left simmering until they burned. One time, Monica visited and found her mother waiting patiently for the toast to be ready while the oven sat cold, never turned on. At her first medical appointment, the doctor had said early-stage Alzheimer's, but she still has the capacity for independent living. Monica and David agreed to take turns caring for their mother, 1 year with the daughter, 1 year with the son. It seemed simple at first, but soon the challenges emerged, more complex than either of them had imagined. Monica, the younger child, lived closest to their mother. She was the one who was almost always there whenever something went wrong. She lived alone, taught high school literature at a local school, and had once been in a deep relationship, one she ended because she didn't want to leave New Jersey. "I can't go. Mom needs me," she had told her best friend. When it was her turn to take care of their mother, Monica managed every detail meticulously. The refrigerator was plastered with a maze of medication schedules. A tiny camera was installed in the kitchen to monitor things while she was at work. But no matter how careful she was, her mother always seemed to find a way to escape. "She's like she has her own radar," Monica had once said bitterly. "Turn your back for 3 minutes and she's gone." Eleanor refused to be confined. She loved to move, and her legs were still strong, like those of a retired athlete. Even when her confusion deepened, she insisted on taking her morning walks. "I need to find someone," she would say vaguely, and when asked who, she'd shake her head. "I forgot, but I know I have to go." At first, Monica chalked it up to symptoms of the disease, but later, that statement would come back as a haunting clue. David, the elder sibling, lived out of state in Pennsylvania. He worked as a civil engineer and had a family. He loved his mother, but with his demanding job, most of the caregiving responsibilities fell to his wife, Linda. Linda was a good daughter-in-law, but caring for someone with dementia is never simple. Last year, when it was time for their mother to move in with David's family, they set her up in a cozy little room in their charming Pocono hillside home. The window overlooked the hills. Linda decorated the walls with floral paintings, picked bed sheets in colors that matched the ones from Eleanor's old house. They thought everything would be peaceful until last summer. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. Linda went out for groceries. David got pulled away to the garage to handle a surprise client visit. When they returned to Eleanor's room, it was empty. No one knew where she had gone. The back door was wide open. Muddy footprints led across the kitchen tiles. The police were called. Neighbors across the Pocono Hills joined the search. News spread quickly. Elderly woman with Alzheimer's missing. It even made the local news. A helicopter was dispatched. K-9 units followed her scent. People shouted her name through dense woods and rocky ravines. Linda cried uncontrollably. David tugged at his hair until his scalp bled. "I should never have let her take even one step alone." That night, Monica drove through the night to her brother's house. When she arrived, the two of them got into a heated argument. David snapped. "All you ever do is blame me. I did my best." "Your best?" Monica broke into tears. "You thought leaving her alone for just a few minutes was safe enough? And when she was with you, did you do so much better?" he shot back. That line drew the boundary. Monica stood up, her voice trembling but clear. "I don't want to fight right now. I just want to find Mom." On the third day, just as hope was beginning to fade, the phone rang. A neighbor who lived on the other side of the hill was calling, he said. "I saw the missing person alert on the news. I think I saw her." He recounted the moment. That morning, while walking along the stream, he had seen an elderly woman sitting quietly on a large rock, gazing at the water. She didn't seem scared. She didn't ask for help. She just sat there, as if she were waiting for someone to appear. David and Monica rushed over. When they saw their mother, neither of them could speak. She looked noticeably thinner, her hair disheveled, her eyes distant and unfocused. "Has Danny not come back yet?" she asked softly. No one understood. After that incident, Eleanor was watched more closely by her children and grandchildren. When she sat alone, she often repeated strange, disconnected phrases and stared out the window with a faraway look in her eyes. Monica often wanted to ask, "Who is Danny?" but never dared. David avoided any mention of the forest altogether. Only Linda, from time to time, would sit beside her mother-in-law, gently holding her hand and asking, "Would you like to go for a walk? I'll come with you." A year later, it was Monica's turn again to care for their mother in New Brunswick, and once again, she vanished. But this time, it wasn't a gentle hillside. It was the dense forest behind the house, in heavy rain, with slippery rocks and treacherous paths. This time, she was lucky. A hiker found her. Not sitting by a stream, but unconscious at the base of a large boulder. 3 days later, Eleanor woke up. The white light of the ICU filtered in through a crack in the curtain. The monitor beeped steadily now, no longer the frantic rhythm of that first night. Monica sat beside the bed, dark circles under her eyes from nights without sleep. David stood near the door, holding a lukewarm paper cup of coffee. Linda was changing the towel on Eleanor's forehead when the old woman's cloudy eyes slowly opened. A single slow blink, a faint furrow of her brow. "Danny?" she whispered. All three of them froze, then slowly turned to look at one another. "Danny?" David asked. "Mom? Who are you talking about?" Eleanor turned her head very slowly, her gaze seeming to pierce through the walls of time. "My little brother, Danny. Chestnut brown hair, bright eyes. He was only 6. He's still lost in the forest." David and Monica stared in confusion. In all their 48 years as her children, they had never once heard the name Danny. Linda spoke softly. "Who's Danny, Mom?" Eleanor's eyes drifted to some distant place. Her voice trembled, but there was a strange clarity to it, as if, for a brief moment, the fog of her memory had lifted, allowing a gust of icy remembrance to blow through. "When I was little, I had a brother. His name was Danny. He was adorable. Curly hair, always smiling. One summer day we played in the woods. There was this old elm tree, wide as an umbrella, and the breeze was so cool. We used to pretend it was a castle. I was the princess, and Danny was the knight. Then I ran home just for a minute to sneak some cookies for the squirrels. But when I came back, Danny was gone." A heavy silence fell. Only the soft beeping of the monitors filled the room. "I thought he was hiding. I called. I shouted until my voice gave out, but there was only the wind and the leaves. No more laughter from Danny. The police found nothing, no trace, no sound. He just vanished. I never forgave myself. My parents blamed me. They never said it outright, but I saw it in their eyes. After that, every meal was cold, every word was short. I lived with that guilt my entire life. I learned to hide everything, Danny's photos, his name, the pain. I buried it deep in my heart. I was afraid that if I kept talking about him, I'd make him die all over again." Tears ran silently down both of her cheeks. But I never forgot. I couldn't forget. Even with dementia, I still remember. And when I walk into the woods, it's to find Danny. Even if I get lost, even if I'm confused, I know I'm looking for him." She looked at her children. "Do you know how lucky you are? To have each other to argue with, to blame, to be angry at?" "Danny had no one," their mother whispered. "No one beside him. And I couldn't blame anyone. It was all my fault. Why didn't God punish me?" Monica broke down in tears. After all these years, the dam finally cracked. The tears welled at the corners of her eyes, falling silently onto her mother's frail hand. "I'm sorry for never telling you," Eleanor said, her voice barely audible. "But I was afraid that if I told you, you'd have to carry this sorrow too. Now I only hope, if somehow my brother is still out there, that God lets him know I never stopped searching for him." The 3 children sat around their mother, who had just opened her heart to a memory buried deep for nearly 70 years. Outside, the morning sun began to filter through the hospital window, casting soft light across every wrinkle on her face. The face where a little boy named Danny still lived, forever etched in the memory of a sister who had carried the burden of silence her entire life. 1 week later, Eleanor passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning as the mist still clung gently to the hospital lawn. The night shift nurse reported that she had slipped peacefully into rest after a long dream. Her blood pressure had gradually dropped, her brain ceased all response. No cry of pain, no final movement. Monica was the first to enter the room and receive the news. She didn't cry. She simply stood there silently watching her mother, her eyes closed, her lips parted ever so slightly, as if whispering one last secret. There was no more beeping from the monitors, only the soft rustling of wind outside the window. Linda and David arrived minutes later. The three stood together, none of them willing to break the sacred silence. The funeral was held 2 days later at a small cemetery on the southern edge of the city, right near the forest where Eleanor used to take her quiet afternoon walks. That forest, the place where she had once lost her way, once panicked, once searched for a name forgotten by time, had now become her final resting place. The oak coffin rested gently on the green grass, its lid lined with sprigs of lavender, chosen by Linda herself. Linda murmured. She used to say that if she had a little garden and a tree to sit under, she could live her whole life wanting nothing else. The funeral was small. Just a few relatives, a handful of old neighbors, an elderly priest, and her 3 children, standing closer than they had in years. Monica spoke first. Her voice wavered at the beginning, but gradually steadied, like the voice she once used in the classroom. My mother wasn't a woman of many words, but every word she spoke was a piece of memory, a fragment of soul. She taught me how to live kindly, even if it meant staying silent to protect peace. She taught me how to listen, even when the words no longer made sense. And I've come to realize there are things she kept to herself not because she didn't trust us, but because she didn't want her sorrow to weigh down the ones she loved. David stepped forward next. He didn't carry a written speech, only one of his mother's old handkerchiefs, its edges worn thin from years of use. It was the same one Eleanor used to tie back her hair when she was young. He began. When I was little, every time I fell and cried, my mother didn't coddle me. She didn't blow on the wound like people usually do. She just quietly led me into the kitchen, washed the scrape, and wrapped it with this cloth. Back then I was angry. I thought it meant she didn't care. But now I understand. Mom always healed things in the quietest way possible. And maybe her passing is one final act of healing. Not for herself, but for us, the children who spent too much time blaming each other and forgot how to hold each other's hands. Sunlight filtered gently through the canopy, casting dappled gold across the fresh headstone. Linda stepped forward and laid a single daisy on the grave. For her, the woman who walked miles through the woods, just to find a little brother who never came back. The cemetery was quiet. Only the sound of birds mingled with the breeze. As the staff began lowering the coffin into the earth, Monica suddenly reached out and held David's hand. She said nothing. The grip was gentle, but David understood. He responded, closing his hand fully around hers, with a look in his eyes that said every apology he'd never spoken aloud. Linda stepped back a few paces, giving the siblings space. She watched them, tears blurring her vision, but the corners of her lips curved into a faint smile. She knew the woman now resting beneath the soil had left behind a gift greater than memory, a lesson in empathy and healing. There are losses that never find a name, yet quietly wear away at the heart for a lifetime. And there are people who leave us, not to abandon us, but to remind us to cherish those who remain. 1 week later, the sky was overcast. Monica returned to the cemetery alone, carrying a small wooden box. Inside were 3 items she had found while going through her mother's things: an old photograph of her mother as a child, standing next to a curly-haired boy, most likely Danny, a copy of a map of the forest behind their old house, and a handwritten note scrawled in Eleanor's shaky handwriting, tucked in a drawer. If there's a next life, I hope to meet you again, in the very place where you disappeared. And this time, I won't leave first. Not far away, David had parked by the side of the road. The engine was off, the window rolled down. He just sat there, patiently, his eyes following his sister's every step. Monica opened the door and slipped into the passenger seat. On the radio, an old childhood tune began to play, the rare one they had both loved as kids. They looked at each other and, without a word, smiled.